Hello students, today we're going to do chapter 2, section 2, and section 3. It sounds like a lot, but section 3 is pretty short. Today we're going to talk about physical properties, physical changes, chemical properties, and chemical changes. So first we'll talk about physical properties. The physical properties, characteristic of a material that can be observed or measured without changing the composition of the substance in the material. So if you're looking at this picture, a physical property of the car would be that it is red. There are several physical properties that you need to know. First, let's talk about viscosity. Viscosity is a substance's resistance to flow. As you can see, looking at the honey in the water, one of them is more viscous than the other. A high viscosity means slow or no flow. So the honey is very slow, and so it has a high viscosity, whereas the water is not slow, and so it has a low viscosity. Viscosity also decreases when heated, and you'll notice this if you pour like vegetable oil in a pan and then heat it up. It becomes, after it's heated, it flows a lot more. So here's the honey in the water. The honey is more viscous than the water. The next is conductivity. Conductivity just allows heat to flow. If it gets hot, that means that it's conductive. So if we're talking about a wooden spoon versus a metal spoon, the metal spoon has more conductivity than the wooden spoon. Malleability. Malleability can be hammered without shattering. Metals are very malleable, so gold, silver, etc. Nonmetals are non-malleable. Next we have hardness. You might remember hardness back when you talked about this in 8th grade with Mohs hardness scale, where diamond was very hard and talc was not hard. The next property is melting point. Melting point is temp at which a substance changes from a solid to a liquid. And then we have boiling point. Boiling point is the temp at which a substance changes from a liquid to a gas. And then we have density. Density we talked about in the last chapter. Substances vary in density and it can be used to identify them. So we know that the density of water is always 1, and so if we have an unknown substance and its density is 1 and it's liquid, we probably would know that it's water. Some more physical properties that you need to know is color, size, smell, taste, and state of matter. So state of matter, liquid, solid, or gas. Those are all physical properties. Separating by physical means. We will talk more about this in class when I do a few demonstrations, but there are 3 ways to separate by physical means. Filtration. Filtration is separating materials based on size. So if you're using like a colander to separate noodles from water, that would be filtration. Distillation is separating liquids based on boiling points, and I will show you a demonstration of that in class. And then we've got chromatography. There's no definition for chromatography, but I will show you what chromatography is in this class as well. And if you remember, if you can separate mixtures by physical means, but you can't separate pure substances by physical means. Physical change. Physical change occurs when some properties of material change, but substances in the material remain the same. So something changes, you've got a definite change, whereas a physical property, you don't have a change, you're just observing what it is. In a physical change, there's some type of change, but the material is still the same thing. Some examples would be a change in size, cutting, slicing. If you're cutting up a piece of paper, it's still paper, but it's just a different size now. Change in shape, pounding. If you crumple up a aluminum can of pop, it's still that aluminum can, but it's now just in a different shape. Change in state or phase. If you take water and freeze it so it becomes ice, it's still water, it's just frozen. It's still the same material. So that would be a physical change. And lastly is dissolving. If you take sugar and dissolve it in water, it's still sugar, it's just now inside the water, which is why it tastes sweet like sugar does. The next section is going to be about chemical properties and chemical changes. Chemical properties, any ability to produce a change in composition of matter. So it's the ability to produce a change, but it doesn't actually change. There are a couple of examples. Flammability, and that's just the material's ability to burn. So wood, the fact that it's flammable, would be a chemical property. And reactivity, the ability or inability to react with materials. So if you're able to react with it or unable to react with it, that would be a chemical property. So it doesn't actually change, it just has the ability to change. That was all about chemical properties. Now we'll move on to chemical changes. Chemical change occurs when a substance reacts and forms one or more new substances. So now we're having a change, there is a change, and we're creating new substances. Some examples: if you have a change in color, if you have a production of a gas. So if you're creating a gas in which you didn't have a gas before, that would be a chemical change. Formation of a precipitate. You will see this in the lab that you do. That is any solid that forms when two liquids are chemically combined. So you have two liquids combined together, and then you get a solid, and that solid is called a precipitate. Change in odor. So if you have a different smell, and change in temperature. Some to physical versus chemical changes. Just because one of the ones that I just mentioned occurred, those 5 signs of a chemical change, that does not mean a chemical change has actually occurred. For example, when a burner on a stove gets hot, it turns red. This is a color change and a temperature change, but is not a chemical change. It's still made up of the same materials. What is happening when the stove gets hot is that you're adding heat to it, and then it has sensors in it so that it turns red, so that it looks, so you know that it's hot. A chemical change is actually creating new substances. To be a chemical change, the composition of the matter must change. That means you're creating new substances. That is it for today's notes. We will review this stuff in class.